Hello, everyone. Hi, welcome. And thank you for joining. This is an interactive session called How to Communicate Your Purpose in an Age of Greenwash. So you will be expected to do something. I hope that's okay with everybody. How it's going to work is we have three fantastic speakers. I will be introducing the three of them in a minute. My name's Kate Levine, by the way, and I'm an independent communications consultant. And when after I introduce all three of them, I'll ask each person to speak for about 5 minutes, and they will tell you a little bit about the topic, communicating purpose in an age of greenwash, and their experience. And then at the end of each talk, they will pose a question to the room. And after we've had all three questions, we'll ask each table to discuss those questions and maybe come up with your responses. And you'll have about 15 minutes to do that, 20 minutes to do that. We'll also walk around the room while you're doing that, and you can ask us questions too. At the end of those 20 minutes, I'll ask each table, so you can decide if you want to answer as a group or nominate someone to answer on your behalf, and to respond back, give us your feedback and how you might have responded to some of those questions. And then we'll have some time at the end of the session to talk about any questions that came up during that time, anything else that was posed, how we tackle some of the problems of communicating in an age of greenwash, and so on and so forth. Does that sound okay? Great, thank you. Okay, so to start, we have Alex Robinson from Hubbub, Sam Williams from Barley Communications, and John Malyon, who's the managing director and founder of We Are Tilt. So I'm going to sit down now because otherwise I can't see, it's too far away. Alex is CEO of Hubbub. Hubbub is an award-winning creative charity that inspires action that's good for the environment and for everyone. Since 2014, Hubbub has been forming unique collaborations across business and communities using behavioral insights, everyday language, and good design to make environmental choices both more desirable and more possible. Hubbub's campaigns meet people where they're at, focusing on topics people are passionate about that also have a big impact, like the food we eat, clothes we wear, and green spaces. After a successful career as an entrepreneur in the music industry, Alex turned to his passion for environmental and social issues, joining Hubbub in 2017. He thereby joined a very small group of people who have worked with both Snoop Dogg and KPMG. Sam is Sam Williams, who's co-CEO of Barley Communications. Sam has over 25 years board-level experience of strategic planning to achieve organizational goals. She co-founded Barley in 2016, with a clear vision to establish a new kind of agency focused solely on supporting purpose-driven organizations on the environment, health and social care, science, food, sustainable infrastructure, social justice, consumer protection, and more. Coming from a financial background, Sam brings to Barley a love of data and a strong analytical skills. She combines this with a keen interest in human behavior to develop brand and communication strategies that deliver maximum impact and return on investment. She provides senior counsel that shaped Barley's award-winning work for clients including Hubbub, Borough Market, Barnardo's, and NLWA. Key to the success of the strategies Sam devises is a keen understanding of audiences, their motivations, interests, and barriers to change. And finally, we have John Malyon, who is the managing director and founder of We Are Tilt, which is a multi-award-winning creative agency dedicated to making a positive impact on people's lives. Leading a team of thinkers, makers, and innovators, John takes on meaningful challenges, builds lasting strategic relationships, and crafts unique digital experiences through an obsessive focus on quality, creativity, and outcomes. So there are three speakers today, and I think each of them has an amazing amount of experience to talk through this challenge, which is communicating your purpose in the age of greenwash. So over to Alex, first of all. Thank you.
Kate. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Yes, good. So let's start with some bad news. There's no shortcut to this. If you want to successfully associate your purpose with your brand, then you have to take the long road and prove your commitment over and over again, and then constantly link it back to the reason you exist, your purpose. In case it needs to be said, in this age of greenwash, stating your purpose is not nearly enough. Actually, preparing for this, I looked up Purdue Pharma's purpose, Compassion for patients and excellence for science inspire our pursuit of new medicines. It's actually quite good. Stakeholders, core strengths, their reason for being, but it's not how the public is going to remember them, because what we do is we deduce from a company's actions what their real purpose is. So here's what I think. Communicating purpose means communicating action, because actions repeated again and again create authenticity. So rather than leading with your purpose, lead with the things that you do that embody your purpose, and then explain why you're doing them. So you might be cautious, maybe ever more vigilant about this, because everyone's talking about greenwash, the public are more aware. There's now the threat of green hush you're probably hearing from your peers. There's regulation coming from the EU that by 2026 you're not going to be able to say eco or sustainable or carbon neutral without being able to really back it up. That means in your communications you're going to need to be specific and accurate. And if you talk to your marketing teams, they'll probably tell you specific and accurate doesn't sound like that much fun. So that means a lot of companies are going to do less. And it'll be tempting to do less, and that should leave the lane wide open for the people willing to double down and do more. So I want to share a couple of lessons from companies that I see up close at Hubbub who I think are doing aspects of this really well. You might have heard of the Community Fridge Network. Community Fridge is a space that brings people together to share food, learn new skills, and prevent fresh food from going to waste. A couple of years ago, we partnered with the Co-op to build out the network. Now, if you go to Co-op's website, they say, as a purpose-led business, our stakeholders are central to all that we do. Anyone can say that. It is not very interesting. What is interesting is that they've invested sufficient resources to build out this community fridge network to 500 across the UK. Last year, it distributed 17 million meals worth of food and welcomed over 300,000 people. And when they hit their goals, Co-op didn't think, okay, we'll go looking for the next news story. They doubled down and committed to another 3 years of deepening the impact. Now, they don't get much attention for that, but you can see the clear link between the project aims of saving surplus food, building resilient communities, and the purpose of a member-based grocery business whose stakeholders are central to all that they do. So by aligning their words with their actions, they build their authenticity. So when they filmed their Christmas TV ad at a community fridge, I mean, for a lot of companies, that would have been quite a greenwashy thing to do. But for Co-op, it's a way of showing their purpose in action and differentiating themselves from their peers, because having backed their actions, having backed their words with actions at appropriate scale for the business, they've built that authenticity. And like all brand building, this is a slow but priceless grind. And you might say, well, that's Co-op. We know they're a purpose-led business. What if we're not so far along on our journey? And there's a phrase that I really like, progress over perfection. And Virgin Media O2 offer a nice example of this, not your traditional purpose-led business. They have something called the Better Connections Plan. It's more or less their sustainability commitment. And it talks about how they're becoming a responsible business. So during COVID, we worked together to find ways to both reduce electronic waste and improve digital inclusion at the same time. We have a campaign, Community Calling, that rescues used smartphones and distributes them to people who need them. These projects, they generate powerful and heartwarming stories about people who connect with distant loved ones, who are able to find jobs after a long time out of the labour market, or maybe they're just able to do their homework. And VMO2 are really keen to tell these stories, as you would expect, but they're also open about their progress. They publish their goals for 2025 and their progress in one simple table, which you can go and read. They have smashed some of their goals, but they are absolutely miles off on some other ones. And it's that transparency that's really important in their communications, because they're not only creating internal accountability, they're demonstrating how serious they are about creating a responsible business. Now, that internal side is really important, and some of you will have heard Solitaire talking about this, that it starts with the people in your business. We see companies with great plans not understood by the teams who have to deliver them. Communicating your purpose starts at home. And as employees, we already know our companies aren't perfect. We want to see progress. We want to see words aligning with action. Pets at Home aims to be the most responsible pet care business in the world. They have 17,000 colleagues in the UK across multiple businesses. And they drafted a sustainability strategy and realised it could be stronger with input from across the team. So we set up something called the Big Listen, which went two ways. They went to their employees and said, here are some ideas. What about yours? What have you got? And then they committed at an appropriate scale. They ran 500 sessions for their employees, generated over 1,000 ideas, and picked up 180-something sustainability champions along the way. So by showing they were serious about listening, Pets at Home's purpose is both better understood and more deeply embedded throughout the team, which will make them better placed to put it into action every day. So I think taking action can come in all shapes and sizes, and you'll know what's right for you. But when you do it, you bring your purpose to life for everyone else. The more you do, the more you share your progress openly, the more you bring your colleagues along, the more your purpose will become inseparable from your brand. And one last bonus, by taking action, you'll create stories. And it's stories that people really want to hear. And I'll pass over to Sam momentarily to tell you about how best to do that. But first, my question for your breakout groups shortly is, remember it's about showing progress over perfection. How can you use your actions to illustrate your purpose? Thank you.
Thank you. Sam?
Thank you very much. Lovely segue, Alex. Everybody here okay at the back? We all good? I won't pick up the mic. There is a risk I might start singing if that happens. So a couple of bits of research to share with you first. I'm not going to PowerPoint you to death, but I've got a couple of things that I'd like to share. Good, that works. That's lovely. This is a piece of research that was done by Zeno. It's a few years old now. It comes from 2020. What is fascinating is this gap that is currently existing between the huge proportion of people who say that purpose is important, and yet only 37% are saying companies have a clear and really strong purpose. It's clearly absolutely crucial that we're all taking steps as organisations to really define and articulate what that purpose is. This study found that people are 4 to 6 times more likely to buy from, support, endorse and defend brands where they feel that they have a clearly articulated purpose that they feel aligned with. And that alignment is of a very personal nature. So another bit of research here, this is from Ipsos Mori. And what's quite interesting is the massive shift that's happened over quite a small period of time, where if we look at Great Britain, we're looking at a huge shift over only 8 years, maths there, of people who are saying they buy from brands that reflect their personal values. So it's important that we are able to articulate purpose as a whole, but also bring it back to a really personal level that people can relate to. And what we do at Barley is help our clients really understand who their audiences are that they want to speak to, and how we can make those personal connections. So I'm sure that you'll all, as businesses, have got a pretty clear idea of who you want to speak to, but how refined have you made that? It's really easy to fall into the trap of thinking of people in great big sways. I know I see lots of quite amorphous things that are chucked out there about the over 50s. Quite a lot of quite youthful looking people here today, I say, buttering you up shamelessly. But, you know, the over 50s is a pretty big bunch of people. We're not all silver surfers. We're not all quite thinking about retirement yet, although it is tempting. But, you know, if I think about me individually, I love music, I love politics, I like really, really bloody awful TV dating shows. How can you really get to that incisive point where you understand who it is you want to talk to and how you're going to connect with them? Well, one of the ways that you can do that is through creating stories that really resonate with them. And one of the themes that really sits across a lot of people and brings people together is family. So I'm going to give you a few examples of some of the things that we've worked on and how we've taken campaigns and organisations with really broad but important purposes and created stories that have really brought that purpose to life in a way that's helped them connect with the people that they want to reach. So the first of those is actually a campaign that Alex just mentioned. It's the Community Calling campaign that Hubbub partnered with Virgin Media O2 on. There are 2 million people across the UK who are digitally excluded for a variety of reasons. It could be access to the hardware that they need to do that. It might be a lack of skills or understanding of how to use that hardware. When we're talking about a campaign where we want people to donate old mobile devices so that they can be passed on to people who need them, the concept of 2 million people in need is very big, it feels unsurmountable, and also it's quite difficult to conceptualise. What we did for this campaign was work with one of the smaller community organisations who are actually distributing those handsets to people, and honed in on one of the first recipients of those handsets to create a beautiful story about the real impact that that campaign could have on someone's life. So we worked with a wonderful woman called Joan. She's an elderly lady who was living in a care home in Southwark. Obviously the issue with digital exclusion became even worse over the pandemic. So we were working towards the end of the first lockdown. Joan had been unable to see any of her family in person for several months. She also had no handset, no way of connecting with them in any other way. We did a really lovely piece with ITV, who came out and filmed her receiving her handset and talking to her son face to face for the first time through this. Hugely emotional piece. I watched it again this morning. It set me off again. But that story helps show people that you don't have to fix the problem of the 2 million people who are excluded. You can give one handset and that will make a huge difference to one person's life. So telling the story of the difference it makes has really, really helped. And it's important when we're looking at how we package these stories up to make sure that we're doing it in a way that makes it really easy for media or for your social channels to actually use that stuff. The media, the face of media has changed enormously over the last 10, 20 years. We're seeing cuts all of the time in the number of journalists that are working on news desks in both national and regional and specialist media outlets. I've seen for the first time a couple of months ago a piece that ran in a national online outlet where it fully acknowledged that the piece was written by AI and then just checked by an editor. So it becomes more and more important that when you want to tell the stories of your organisation, you package up as much as you can to give it over and make it really, really easy for people who are working in media to actually use those without having to do that much work because they just don't have the time or the resources to do that anymore. So another example of where we did this, we're working with Oceana, which is a fantastic campaigning organisation protecting oceans around the world. One of the issues that they're trying to deal with is marine protected areas around the UK where the word protected is absolutely not what they are being. They're paper parks, but bottom trawling, so huge fishing boats that are dragging nets through and ripping up the seabeds are still allowed to operate in these marine protected areas. It's a massive issue. We wanted to campaign to be heard by policymakers to really start thinking about how they can put real protections in place to look after the absolutely vital marine life that are living in these areas. So we looked for an example of where that was being done successfully. Positive stories that people connect with tend to resonate and make people feel more hopeful that they can do something themselves. There's a terrific campaign that went up in Sussex where we connected with a guy who'd been fishing and diving off the coast of Sussex, had really seen the changes and the destruction that had happened from bottom trawling. And then they actually imposed a ban on bottom trawling in that area. We got some great filming underwater, used the photos of when he was with his granddad, showing this real journey and bringing to life how, you know, these changes could really make a difference, so that you could get excited about kelp without having to really get excited about kelp. So just a couple of quick examples there. Somebody held up time up about 30 seconds ago. I'm going to shut up and hand over to John.
Thank you. On that, I'm going to start with a story based off what you've just said there about that sort of regeneration. And on the south coast, which is where I live, there's an interesting observation. I have never seen bioluminescence in my life, but because of the lack of bottom trawling that they've had, I was at my sister's 40th about a month ago, had a few drinks, went for a midnight swim, bioluminescence everywhere, and that's because of the regeneration that's happening in the kelp beds and everything. So it's just amazing what can happen when we actually put our minds to it. So I'm John. I'll segue back to what I'm supposed to be talking about. Firstly, I think it'd be remiss to say that I've got a little bit of imposter syndrome being here. I don't feel like I should be here, but and I've been busy sort of writing down a lot of notes from what you guys have been saying, because they're fascinating tips. But and I've actually, while sitting here, rejigged my talk slightly, so bear with me. So actually, what I want to talk about is action, impact, and ambassadors. So for me, I think that a message shared from an ambassador is twice as important as that from a company. I spoke earlier on about Finisterre being a surf brand, and they've got this whole sort of take back, reskin, resell program that they have in place, which is amazing. It keeps you in the brand. You sort of take your old stuff back, they'll reskin it, sell it on, and they'll give you money off the new clothes. That's an amazing thing. But I'm out there talking about this on their behalf, being an ambassador for them, and I don't even work for them. So it's just that kind of thing. It's like the ambassador side of things you want to create. A little bit about who we are. Obviously, you explained, but in a sentence, we use strategy, code, and creativity to shape digital experiences and tell stories that make big changes. The team thrive when we take on projects of substance. I see their eyes light up when you get a brief and you're like, oh, this is a good one. And you can just see the creative sort of sparks sort of coming out. So they thrive when the end result is kind of rooted in purpose and not just profit. But that's not to say that profit is a dirty word. I think it's important to call that out. I think it's important to sort of say that as a business, any business, if you use that profit to kind of reinvest to create a better future for everyone involved in that kind of footprint of a business, from customer to employee to stakeholder to ambassador to supply chain, if you're reinvesting it and creating a better future for them all, then that's a good thing. And I think when businesses commit to that vision, we all stand to benefit. So, Alex, you spoke about action, which is kind of where I've reorganise what I was talking about, so I'm going to go on to that. So what I wanted to do really was look at the action that we're seeing businesses do through the clients that we work with, and then just talk about the ambassador side of things. But I think it's the action side of things. You've got to actually do the action before you can tell the story, and I think that's where the whole greenwashing thing comes in, is people are jumping to the story before they've really sort of thought out that action and sort of told it through and sort of have rigorously thought about how they do business, the way they're operating, what they're doing, and then reporting on it. So the term environmental social governance sort of rings true here. So I guess from my experience is what I'm going to share right now is the types of clients that we work with and what actions they're doing, so hopefully we can take a few lessons from that. Let's just take a look at environment. We work quite a lot with some fairly big clients who traditionally you wouldn't necessarily think environmental and social governance. So I'm going to look at, firstly, Diageo, massive global drinks firm, and I'm also going to look at Deloitte. We work with both those two firms, and we work to develop culture, develop capability, and communicate key important initiatives and embed changes. So, I mean, let's take a look at Diageo first and what their ESG strategy is. They have a strategy called Society 2030, Spirit of Progress. That's their big 10-year strategy, obviously started in 2010, 10 years going into it. And this is 3 pillars of strategy. Strategy 1 is promoting responsible drinking. Strategy 2 is championing inclusion and diversity. And then the third one is pioneering glass-to-grain sustainability. Now, we have been fortunate enough to work across both the responsible drinking one and inclusion and diversity strategy. So we're working in the business, helping them to create change and communicate these key initiatives. So the key projects that we've been asked to sort of collaborate with them on is, firstly, they sell alcohol. What are the negative impacts of alcohol? Firstly, drink driving. I've got 2 minutes left, apparently. Big sign. I'll be quick. Drink driving. How can we change behaviours globally around drink driving? So that's one of the projects we're doing. Another one is around underage drinking. Big thing. How can we help change attitudes and sort of change that peer pressure that exists within young people? Again, around the world. I think we're working with Diageo, we're sort of about 1 million people in 25 countries at the moment, which is fantastic. And then you look at inclusion and diversity. It's how can I create a more inclusive and sort of equitable place of work? How can I create a kind of a workplace culture that actually kind of lets people sort of be the best version of themselves, effectively? The same DEI messaging and DEI movement exists within Deloitte. They want to do that. They're really pushing hard to sort of try and create the best workplace culture that they can, not just in the work, because that then tessellates and cross-pollinates out into society. But then equally, we have worked with Deloitte to help create an internal sort of initiative which was called World Climate, and the campaign that we worked on was Rewrite Our Future. So this is an internal initiative only. It's not being communicated externally. And what they wanted to do was try and empower their 110,000 strong workforce to take ownership over their climate actions by driving knowledge, driving awareness, and reframing it as from a threat to an opportunity. You know, rather than this big dissonance and doom, which is too big for me to solve, it's like, let's break this down. What actual impacts can you have at a personal level? And then when we stack those all together, the kind of cumulative total of that is positive impact. And so it's about sort of how can you empower them. So you might not have heard of any of these initiatives, but that's okay. This message is not for everyone. They're not trying to, maybe the wrong word based on what the keynote speaker said earlier on, but they're not trying to virtue signal to everyone. And shining a light on all the good things they're doing. What they're doing, so they're not doing it without purpose, they're not doing it without precision, and they're not doing it without meaning. And it's about to delete, hold on. They're just going about their business, making money, making profit, reinvesting it in, doing good things in the process. And that's really important, I think, for me. It's like they're using that and reinvesting it to create a bit of good back into the world. And they're positively impacting the lives that the thing they're doing is relevant to. So helping reduce underage drinking, helping sort of save lives by kind of changing behaviours about attitudes, creating a better place of work, empowering people about sort of how to take control over their climate actions, climate footprints. So the point is here, I guess, in the context of this speech, is don't scattergun your messaging. Keep it precise, keep it relevant to the people that you're actually positively impacting. Don't be dragged into the relentless need to feed the marketing machine, marketing manager, Rachel, to feed the marketing machine, to kind of feed these social algorithms. Just set about doing the thing. Do it right, communicate it well, be authentic, and do it to the people that you're trying to impact. And if you impact them well, you will create ambassadors, and it's those ambassadors will then go on to tell your stories. And then the marketing person can come back in and capture those stories and tell them authentically. I hope that kind of made sense. That's me. My question is around that of a growth mindset, really. So we learn by doing. Sometimes we succeed. Sometimes we fail. Failure is okay. It's how we learn. What's important is that we learn. So looking at the big wide world and what people are doing, what businesses are doing, what lessons, both positive and negative, can we sort of extrapolate and about how they've sought to communicate purpose.
Great. Thank you.
All good.
Thank you. Yes.
Don't mind me jumping back in. I've realised I forgot to set a question, which I do have one.
You did. Oh, I think you did. Oh, well, anyway, I'm going to repeat more.
What stories can you tell that bring your purpose to life?
Anyway, never mind. Okay, so I'm going to repeat the 3 questions. But of course, feel free to debate and discuss anything you've heard today, because I think there were quite a lot of interesting points that people brought up, which may not be completely captured by the questions. So the 3 specific questions are: how can you use actions to demonstrate your purpose? What stories can you tell to bring your purpose to life? And then finally, what lessons can we learn, both positive and negative, from existing businesses about how they've sought to communicate purpose? So you've got about 15 minutes now to discuss among yourselves, and we can all walk around as well, or if you'd like to put your hand up, we can come over and have a talk as well. Okay, thank you. And we'll come back at 11:15, and I'll ask someone on each table. Sorry. Okay, everyone, I think the time has come for us to start coming back into the room, as it were. So I'm going to ask every table to maybe nominate a person who can give us a little bit of a flavour of what they discussed at their table, just a few minutes from every table. Maybe some other questions that you came up with, or issues that you found really interesting and would like to talk about more. And I'll write those down, and then if you also have some questions, maybe we'll do what you talked about first, and then after we've gone around the whole room, I'd like to ask you for some questions back to us and for the rest of the table, because this is interactive, about some of the things that you couldn't answer that you'd like to talk about more. So maybe we start with this table first. I'm going to give you this mic. I'm just going to hold it here until someone takes.
So we started off by ignoring all of the questions that you gave us, although they were good questions, and we started off by talking about what scale of impact is enough, and how do you determine whether you have sufficient results to talk about. And we talked about the importance of a credible journey and being transparent about where you want to get to, and the fact that if your impact is small at this point, being able to tell the fuller context of the aspiration. And then legacy is the other one. Oh, and then legacy, yeah. We talked about how you then talk about what you're currently doing in terms of your positive impact on society and the environment, while as an organisation you have done diametrically different things in the past, recent and not so recent. And again, the answer was just radical transparency. Just keep talking and acknowledging what's been good, what's been bad, what needs to change, and be open to having that dialogue. Once you've set off the reputation bomb, be open to then having that interaction with a variety of different stakeholders.
Brilliant. Great. Thank you. Cheers. How about you guys? Thank you.
Hi, so we're going to use an example from my company that hopefully answers all 3 questions. We're going to try and fudge it a little bit. But so one of the brands that we work with is called Canterbury. It's a rugby brand, and we got it wrong a couple of years ago when we launched our female rugby kit. We launched the men's modelled on rugby players. It was during COVID, and we launched the women's on models. It wasn't intentional. It was an accident, and it actually created a really good conversation. So we admitted we got it wrong. We engaged with the female players, and from there we actually have been really key in driving female rugby and being ambassador for that. And so much so that last year the Irish rugby shorts are white. And with periods, rugby players don't really want to wear white shorts. So we had a white short amnesty. We turned the Irish kit to blue shorts, navy shorts, and anyone with white rugby shorts, if they wanted to send them to us, we would send them back a blue pair. So I think getting it wrong can actually be a really good lesson to really help you engage deeply in a topic and then get it right. And actually that ended up being, if we had paid media for that rugby short that went viral, that would have probably been about 2 million in media. So again, getting it wrong can actually help you then get it right really well in the future.
That connects back to the radical transparency, doesn't it? So that's great. Thanks, great story. Would you mind passing to the table behind you? Thank you.
Great, it's a difficult story to follow. That's beautiful. So we talked a little bit about communicating value and really thinking about that as a phased approach. So you might have an aspiration for what you want to do, but think about breaking that down into steps and not making something too intangible for people not to be able to connect with. We talked about sharing, kind of like showing the path, I guess, and that comes back to that aspirational point that you have this kind of ultimate ambition, but how do you show the path to get there? And then we took that down to kind of like personal action as well. So whatever story you've got, how do you translate that into action? How do you show the benefits of that? And ultimately, how do you make that personal?
Where do you like next?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, can I summarize the conversation here? We talk a lot. It was very interesting here. So first, we talk about on how we communicate with what doesn't go as planned. Is that something that people commonly do, companies commonly do? We also told that companies should focus on what makes the highest impact. And a lot of discussions around that, around the metrics too, how to measure, who is interested in those metrics. Also very much on the language challenge, not language itself, but who are we talking to, how to communicate what they want to listen to. And we told that to have a diverse background when we create those pieces is very important. And also the storytelling, not from a monologue perspective, but more from a dialogue perspective. As the first session we had two participants having a dialogue in two different opinions, and we could identify with both of them. So this was an example we use. So something more?
Don't assume, because 1.5 is also 2.7.
Okay. We also use an example that 1.5 degree increase doesn't translate to everyone. For Americans, what means 1.5? We found out in Fahrenheit is 2.7. So, yes.
Very interesting. Thank you.
Next.
Right, yeah. Wasn't expecting to report back. I suppose one of the things we started with was this great point about the importance of action first and speaking afterwards, or speaking about substantial action, and that's a sort of self-evident way to avoid greenwash. But then the challenge of how long it takes to actually accomplish things and accomplish things that you want to talk about. So there is this sort of lag, but you have to communicate all the time. And so that was sort of a challenge, and particularly we've got Tidewell Tunnel here, so we've got an infrastructure project that takes 10 years to build. So it's all very well coming with these initial ambitions, but it takes a long time to be able to talk about it. And then you don't want to flood the airwaves with everything that you possibly did in the last 10 years, so how do you be targeted and accurate? We talked about the importance of stories and how do you personalize things. So it's not so interesting to talk about the sort of low-hanging fruit and the minutiae of company improvements. So how do you find those nuggets of real interest? And we talked a little bit about the contrast between companies that are wholly purpose-led. Body Shop came up as an example, which have a wealth of stories to tell about, and they can easily talk about the whole breadth of their product range, whereas for other companies that are earlier on the journey, it's quite hard to come out and talk about one product that's good whilst not talking about the big elephant in the room of all the other product range that isn't so good. But we heard from the Tidewell Tunnel, for example, sorry to speak on your behalf. It was important to communicate, yes, there's absolute social value, there's an amazing biodiversity and human value in terms of cleaning up the Thames, but there's also this embodied carbon cost. So just communicate both, be honest, have the numbers, put them out there, admit what the harm is, but do it in a way that's balanced with this story of, and here's all the good that goes with that, and that's why we've done it the way we've done it. So just to be honest. Mm-hmm. Was there anything else?
Well, we also ignored the instructions and we split into smaller groups. So I think you'll get 3 like little snapshots. In our little group, we really kind of went in deep into the action and stories. So we had a really good chat, finding out more about each other's organisations and just kind of brainstorming what are the really interesting actions and stories. I think a challenge that we both found is how to get to the simplicity of like a really specific action when we both have organisations that are trying to communicate a load of really complex things to lots of different audiences. So might be interested to hear any sort of further tips from our panel on that. Let's go this way now.
Hi. So I guess we were having similarly, we kind of just chatted about everything that you guys chatted about rather than answering any specific questions. But I think obviously the kind of key thing that came out is that it's not really greenwashing if you've got action to back it up, and there's almost like a question of what's the problem with greenwashing if it's communicating a purpose that you're actually doing, because then it just isn't greenwashing. But how, actually similar to your point around kind of timelines and how patience needs to come into that, and how telling stories about the impact that you're having kind of needs to wait until you have that impact to share, and whether organisations can have that patience and figure out ways to communicate that impact as it's kind of happening. We're also talking about the opportunities for kind of charity/third sector organisations to partner with brands in order to almost like what value can be added from both sides in order to genuinely create those stories and create that impact at the same time for both sides. I think that's kind of what we talked about. Anything to add?
No.
Yeah, lastly, so we were talking about being humble, humility, so kind of radical transparency. If things haven't gone wrong or you haven't made the progress that you need to, is being bold enough to maybe accept some criticism about that and then have the actionable stories around it. And then lastly, we were talking about variety in tone, maybe moving away from some of the doom and gloom as well in some of this, and maybe using humour or other emotions, which we've seen in the latest Apple net zero update, which has had a lot of debate around it, but they used humour very well to kind of keep the audience engaged.
I was hoping Apple would come on. Thank you. Thanks very much. Okay, so much to talk about there. Thank you all very much. I think everyone had really interesting conversations, and the fact that you're all still talking vivaciously when the time finished means that we've probably still got a lot to talk about. Just reflecting back on what you talked about, which I'll do for a very brief amount of time, and then we'll throw it open for questions. I know there have already been a couple of questions, and also if you guys would like to reflect back too. I heard quite a few themes coming through: humility, maybe getting things wrong, being radically transparent. I think that came through in most of the conversations. A bit of a tension between the great things that you want to do, or maybe a few of the great things that you've already done, versus the long path and the amount of time it might take to get to some of the great things too. So the sort of boring things, or the not so good things, or the difficult things, or the things that are still emitting a lot of carbon, for example. How do you talk about those things? So getting that balance right too. And then when we talked about communicating more specifically, simplicity, tone, variety, humour, talking about the word personal came up a lot. So I think that might be something to discuss a bit too. How do you make things resonate? Something that I think about a lot when I'm communicating, and we talked about Body Shop before, so I used to work in communications at the Body Shop too, and to think about connecting not just with data and with rational thought, but also emotionally. So how do you make that really, and we talked about purpose being something that connects very deeply between an organization and its audiences, but making that deep connection, I think, has to be emotional too. So they're just a couple of reflections from me, but I'd like to throw it open to the rest of the speakers too. Do you want this or no? You might sing. Okay.
I thought the point here was really interesting about simplicity, and there's definitely things, sometimes you just know too much. You know everything you're doing. And I think prioritising and really kind of honing into what's the one thing we want to say now, because you've got time. You don't have to say everything all at once to everyone. Let's figure out what's important. What do people really need to know that will make a difference, that will work for you, for your organisations, and work for them in terms of how they connect with them. We see a lot of press releases that are very, very long and tell you everything you ever needed to know about everything an organisation is doing. And journalists do not have the time to deal with that. They just don't. I think keep your message simple and just get one thing across at a time. Don't try and boil the sea.
Great, thanks, John.
Just expanding on that, so I think it's simple and relevant. I think, what was the, I think it came from a chap at Ogilvy. He said, in marketing and kind of communications, no one cares what you've got to say until they understand what it means to them. And I know that's quite brutal, but it's kind of true to a degree in terms of relevance. And if we're talking about purpose and trying to communicate it, it's distilling it down into its simplest form, communicating it at an emotional level so that it resonates, and making it relevant to the person so they stand up and take notes. I think you get those three things, you're on to a winning path.
Great.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that about communicating benefits to people rather than just your activities. So important. I think one of the, I guess, it was so interesting hearing the tables reflecting backwards, and one of the things that maybe didn't quite come out but was underlying some of it was this slight fear of greenwashing by accident. It's like, is what we're doing enough for the scale of our business? Can we talk about what we're doing because the time frame is so long that we're not actually there at the impact stage yet, for example? And that's a really interesting challenge. I think there's a few ways to think about that. One is to communicate specifically what you're doing and then say, but there's more. And then signpost people to where you highlight what the more is, what is not in scope with the activity you're talking about. Where do you know that you're behind the curve as well as ahead of the curve? Because not every company can do everything at the same time. It's just not feasible. So I think that's really important. Show your activity, show what more there is, and show your progress. The other thing is, if you're worried about not being seen to be authentic as an organisation, well, there are things that you can do that will reassure the public and your audiences that you are authentic. And one of those is in public affairs. So is your lobbying aligned with what you're telling the public and the action that you're taking? Because if those two things are not aligned, we're not going to believe your purpose. But if they are, then you can make your claims and you can say, and you know what, we are, for example, signed up for the Better Business Act. I think we have 2,000 organisations in the UK who have signed up for this call for much wider responsibility to be built into the Articles of Association for companies. 2,000 is a good start. It's nothing in the great scheme of things, but it's a good start. But if you can show that you're pushing for that change, then you are also reassuring people that the other claims you're making are aligning with the future that you actually want to see, not just the future you're telling the public that you want to see.
It's like the B Corp.
Exactly, so B Corp and
change
Business
the
Act
articles.
are connected.
They're connected.
As the public affairs and lobbying point, I think is so important.
Yeah.
So important, because
it,
that's the divergence that you'll get with people, that gap, where people won't believe you anymore. Because saying, we think this is great, but we're really lobbying the whole time because we want to get tax breaks for fossil fuel companies or whatever else it might be. Then you don't see that. But Better Business Act is the lobbying aspect of the B Corp, really, because it's about,
just
it's
and
about
you don't have to be a B Corp.
those three people, planet, and purpose all on one line.
I quite like the not positioning, but the way that they talk at B Corp. It's the declaration of interdependence between business and society. I really like that kind of like linking.
Any questions from the audience now? Loads, great. Okay, do you want to just shout? Is that okay?
Yeah, sure. Very loud voice. big box, which I'd say very, I'd be really interested to hear from the panel on a slightly different angle on this topic, which is about what you do when you're trying to communicate purpose, which I think, for example, a lot of people do pretty well, but in the age of greenwash, being that everyone else is saying stuff that isn't really true. So, to give you a brief example, which I was talking about a minute ago, I'm a jeweller. We're the UK's leading bespoke jewellery company. We've been trailblazing with certain ethical things. We don't call ourselves an ethical jewellery company. There's no such thing. We do our best. We talk about what's shit. We talk about what's okay. We talk about what's good. That's what you do, right? And it's really easy for us to connect emotionally with the story of jewellers. You know, everyone's emotional about jewellery purchases. But, you know, there's a lot of jewellers out there saying, oh, look, we're really ethical because we're using recycled gold. Now, I don't know about you. If you don't want your wedding ring anymore, would you chuck it in the bin? No. You know, the very least you can do is recycle gold. And furthermore, recycled gold that's being sold to jewellers isn't consumer waste. It's industrial waste. And it's very often companies that are greenwashing industrial gold by putting it into casting houses where there's an awful lot of waste, which is just part of the, the tree, for example, when you're casting, and then that all becomes recycled gold, and suddenly it's ethically attractive. So jewellers are buying this gold, saying, look, we're doing really well for the environment, we're using recycled gold, and it's bollocks. Now the trouble is, a lot of the actual jewellers themselves don't know that. So, okay, I can be in my industry and I can talk on panels like this in my industry and tell people, but it's slow. How on earth, and I'll use this example because there's so many other examples like this in the world, I'm sure everyone can tell me an example like this. It's just one that's easy to understand. How do you, without sort of saying, all these other people are really crap, but look at us, we're doing a tiny bit better. You know, how do you actually communicate in this wave of greenwash, especially when you're trying to communicate to consumers who will make a decision on Instagram in about 3.5 seconds or something, won't they? Not that that's a challenge for you at all, but I just wondered if you had anything to bring, examples or anything to bring in that kind of angle of this, how to communicate in the age of greenwash.
Great question. Anyone like to have a go at answering that?
It's a I'll give it a whirl. It's clearly a real challenge because there's a lot of technical aspects to the different levels of what sustainability means in jewellery. I would say around, you can't get that across in a 3-second ad because people are just going to keep scrolling, and that's that. There's potential, I think, to do more sort of longer form piece, so to engage with, lifestyle journalists who can really dig into this stuff and go a bit deeper, because you can't get it across as a brand in such a short kind of space of time. I think that would be the sort of,
I don't say I have the answer to this either because this is a tough problem, but part of it is maybe if other people are making weak claims and the wider world doesn't understand the problem, then is there an opportunity to own the problem in the way that Tony's Chocolonely talk about slavery in the chocolate supply chain? They aren't able to fix that on their own, but they're sure making other organisations think twice before making claims. Oatly do this something similar with oat milk, comparing it to dairy milk, in a very playful way, but it's almost by highlighting the problem, they're not criticising other brands directly, but they are changing the kind of the conversation around their topic. So maybe that's the opportunity. But then you have to have significant resources to do that, which is a challenge.
Yeah. That's a great example. Do you want to sort of respond, John?
No, you go.
Can I actually, rather than asking a question, can I speak to that as a consumer?
Yes.
Yeah. Of jewellery, because I like jewellery. If I'm scrolling, and I see someone speaking passionately, about their product, And as authentically as you just have, I'm going to stop scrolling and I'm going to listen to what you've got to say. So I'm saying reels.
That's exactly what I just recorded. Well, you said the right thing. That's all I need to do. I mean, we've done what you said actually very much in the industry. It's as far as I can get. So
it's the positioning though, isn't it? Because it's not about you doing other brands down. No, it's about you leading your own brand.
This is the truth, just so you know, without saying we do it.
Well, you're an expert.
Although right away, talking to the people who do something your own jewellery, take it to Age Jewelers and actually do a goldsmith, your own stuff, then you really notice things. That is the best.
I think also if the if the message has substance enough and it's as you say, it's got, what am I trying to say? Let me rewind this. So basically what I think is happening, we're talking about Instagram, talking about Reels, talking about 3.5 seconds of attention span and stuff. That's a byproduct of the marketing industry and tech, basically. They're just creating content, creating an attention economy, and stuff is getting shorter and shorter and shorter and less depth to it. I think actually, when we're talking about purpose and important topics and things like that, I think we actually need to look like 5, maybe 10 years ahead and actually look at what potentially is coming in terms of like trends in the kind of the communications world. And I think actually what we're going to start seeing is a kickback from this kind of short, meaningless, I mean, it's great sitting there on wheels and evenings, but it's also, you're left feeling, that was funny, but I don't feel enriched with this. Yeah, where's the substance? Where's my 2 hours? And I think there's a starting a sort of swelling tide of sentiment, which is I want more out of this. I want to. If my time is valuable, I actually want to invest more in it. And as you say, if you're scrolling through something and all of a sudden there's something a bit more longer, but someone talking passionately and emotionally about something, you will commit that time because the value you attribute to that is greater.
But it's also known audience, isn't it? So I'm the audience.
Yeah. We are out of time, but do you want to sort of risk the wrath of the organisers and have a couple more minutes? Okay.
I'd like a nice round-up if that's...
Sure. Yeah, please do. Go ahead. That's fine.
I was just thinking about, obviously, it's really complicated, everything we've been talking about, and there's a whole lot.
Do you mind? Can I give you this? Thank you.
The weird acoustic. Hi. I was just thinking about the title of this talk, How to Communicate Your Purpose in an Age of Greenwash, and all the things that we've been talking about that have come up, and there's a lot going on, isn't there? Before I came here, because I like being a bit of a word nerd, I like to look at the roots of words. I looked up the root of greenwash, which is whitewash, and it's a deliberate intent to mislead. So I think the very simplest thing we could do and keep doing and keep on doing is don't do that. Don't have a deliberate attempt to mislead, and none of us have, so we're already doing it.
The deliberate bit is really important, and intention is important. But I think also the point that you made too, or someone made about it can still be interpreted potentially as greenwash if all of the data isn't there. So I do think having that information, and a lot of you talked about this, the information that may not be that perfect, that may not be that good, but you know that you are making progress and that you're talking about where you are trying to get to and what that journey looks like. I hate to use the word journey, but what that looks like so far, where you are on that path. Anyone, like last couple of comments or questions? Yeah?
Can I just flip it on its head and ask about how to communicate in an era of green hush? And that's the issue that we're all talking about in here, really, isn't it? We're all reluctant.
Too scared to.
Yeah.
I mean, I personally think it's similar, which is that you find some great stories that resonate with your audience, so they're relevant and they're simple and they're emotional, all of those things that we talked about. But you don't forget about the things that may not be so great too. And I think that point about lobbying is spot on. Really, really good.
I think it's also recognising that as the rugby lady, said that actually those conversations, the green hush, the fear of not speaking up, you did something, you owned it, and actually that conversation turned into a positive. And I think that's the important thing, is like just put the conversation, make it mainstream, have the conversation, be honest with it. And actually, like this, we were talking about the Apple advert that came out, and the day after it came out, my LinkedIn exploded with just conversations on either side of the fence. But what was interesting, I was like, I haven't seen this level of conversation at all. And you were like, you know, it's now here in my face, and that is a good thing.
Yeah.
So,
agreed.
Absolutely. Really important point made at the back of that. You know, communication is not broadcast, it's also listening.
Dialogue,
You know, there's a lot to learn.
All right, great. I think we have to leave it there. Thank you all so much.